But what we would like to do now is to give the very fullest of our attention to our speaker at this time, or speakers, really. So it's my honor, privilege, to introduce a person who really needs no introduction, the Most Honorable P.J. Patterson, a former Prime Minister of Jamaica. Clearly you have lots about him in here, and of course if you need more you can Google or otherwise, if you haven't heard of him before, right? But he also has with him, and he will introduce them, Mr. Gary Peart and Ms. Lorna Green, who will be part of his presentation. And so I ask you to join me in welcoming them, give a keen ear to what they have to say. We may have some time for a question or two, because I know audience participation is important. So hold your questions until the end of the presentation. We will assure that there is a little bit of time for at least one or two questions before we move on to the next session at 11:45. I do want you to note, however, on your program for today, please note that lunch starts at 1:50, not at 11:50. All right? So don't rush out because you're hungry. If you still need a little something, there's carbs over there. There's a little bit of something else. But lunch is really at 1:15. So, Caribbean Business Conference audience, participants, 28th conference, let's have a round of applause for our presenters.
Moderator, Carlin Faye Rodney, distinguished panelists and presenters, ladies and gentlemen. As you have already heard, it was my supreme honor to welcome the very first Caribbean Multinational Business Conference to Jamaica as the Prime Minister 28 years ago. What a difference the years have made. By virtue of my continuous involvement in successive gatherings over the passing years, my brother Andy Young and myself have now become patrons of these conferences. And so it is now my distinct pleasure and indeed my duty as a patron to once again welcome you back home at your 28th annual conference. As we say in Jamaica, for no matter what, nowhere no better than yard.
That's it.
You are all in your yard. This year, we have altered somewhat the opening format. I asked to move down the batting order, and I hope even our American friends will understand the cricket significance of this. Our batsmen in recent times are not functioning as well as they do. So I have moved down from number 1 and number 2 to batting at number 3. But that allows me the luxury to speak and also subsequently to introduce and preside over this session not as former Prime Minister, but as statesman in residence of the P.J. Patterson Institute for Africa Caribbean Advocacy at the University of the West Indies. We are hosting this session. My original intention was to include as presenters and panelists a number of African leaders and academics, and I had already written to them. Regrettably, but also fortunately, this conference coincides with the reparations conference in Accra, which is taking place right now. The President of Ghana has convened an international conference where for the first time African leaders and Caribbean leaders are meeting together under the theme Building a United Front to Advance the Cause of Justice and the Payment of Reparations to Africa. The creation of a united African agenda and program to galvanize Africans and people of African descent, wherever they reside, to correct historical injustices of the slave trade, colonialism, apartheid, and racism is cause for all of us in this conference to rejoice and be glad. So I do not regard the coincidence of our timing as an unfortunate clash, because we must be able to play golf and chew gum at the same time. And what they are doing in Africa today is a signal, a welcome signal, to beckon this business conference meeting in Ocho, Rios, to make common cause within the framework of Pan-Africanism, to provide a solid platform for action that enables successful advocacy if we are to satisfy the 10 delineated areas where we, the descendants of the African enslaved, are seeking reparatory justice, which is long overdue. I've been asked to make a presentation and to chair a panel discussion on the topic Africa, Caribbean, US, a necessary path to development by forming what I call a strategic alliance that is made within the broader framework of reinvigorating and sustaining the Pan-African Renaissance of optimism and great expectations in Africa, Caribbean, and the United States to accelerate sustainable development. Virtually every topic which I am going to mention is included for fuller discussion subsequently in your conference deliberations. What I am going to be saying about them is not intended to be exhaustive, but really to set the framework, what I would call the broad context and the political environment in which our discussions are taking place. I believe that we are truly at another pivotal point in our evolution as African people, when we need to take stock, to engage in deep reflection and re-infuse our efforts in order to achieve the African Renaissance and its promise of cultural, spiritual, socio-economic and political renewal, and ultimately an inclusive and sustainable model of development. Charlie Wrangle is not here with us in person, but I believe those words reflect what he has been fighting for, like so many others, without achieving them. Emancipation, independence, and the Civil Rights Act were unquestionably all milestones of tremendous significance. Let us not lose sight that each was preceded by many years of steadfast struggle, determination, and an unwavering desire by our people to create social and economic conditions in which they could experience the values of freedom and dignity, and be optimistic about gaining steady improvement in their daily lives, as well as in their capacity to contribute respectfully to the development of Africa, the Caribbean, and the diaspora. Without exception, all of these events and other related milestones prompted widespread public jubilation among the masses of oppressed people, and they are in fact still celebrated today. There has always been a perception, an expectation, and determination that things can and could only get better. But if we are to be honest with ourselves, things have not moved with the pace that we would hope, and there are signs in some places that things could get worse. When I hear that in some states of the United States, you are not allowed to teach black history anymore, and even worse than that, they're trying to sell the line that those who were enslaved were lucky because they got skills which they would not have acquired but for slavery. What a monstrous lie and a cruel distortion of history. So we really have to get together and work together for the next stage of the struggle. In the United States, you need a new Martin Luther King. Our people, in the light of this, are becoming increasingly impatient and restless. Some are even despondent with the progress being made, and justifiably so. We see this in the current turmoil in Haiti, the first country to win the battle for independence, and with it the abolition of slavery. The colonial powers, particularly France and the United States, have made them pay a grievous price for having the courage and the temerity to defeat Napoleon's army. What is happening in Haiti today is not because of the Haitians, but because of external intrusion in Haiti and an attempt to reverse the gains which they made centuries ago. We have to look at the recent coups in the Sahel region of South Africa, and in the desperate and perilous attempts by migrants in Africa and the Caribbean who drown or perish to escape poverty and despair at home. Must there not be a feeling of revulsion when people try to explore the depths of the Atlantic without proper equipment? Within hours, all the forces can be brought together to try and see if they can perform a rescue. And at the same time, we see on our screens boats overloaded with migrants and a vessel sailing alongside them, not for the purpose of rescuing them, but for the purpose of enabling them to reach European soil. I'm not going to go today into Gaza. I will simply say this: whether you are Jew or Gentile or Muslim or Israeli or Palestinian, we all are human beings. Vibrant, impactful, and sustained development has to be underscored and characterized by more extensive and meaningful Africa, Caribbean, United States cooperation. And this has to be done by determined and honest leadership, by inclusivity and the strategic deployment of technological and other enablers to catalyze and support its resilience. I say here today, a strategic alliance of Africa, Caribbean, and the diaspora is an essential path to sustainable development. We can't expect others to do it for us. We must do it for ourselves. No one among us can deny that the possibilities and opportunities for shared action in tackling problems and achieving our common ambitions and aspirations are vast. The only question is how fast and efficiently can we execute whatever plans we formulate to meet the challenges and exploit the opportunities which exist in today's economic environment. Any engagement between Africa, Caribbean, and the United States must be based on a new or reconceptualized pragmatic framework rooted in principles of respect and trust, which reaffirm and underscore our common humanity, and that our nations, irrespective of military might, economic power, are all entitled to the exercise of their full sovereignty. The world in which we live, the architecture was designed by the victorious powers. They vested in the Security Council the responsibility for peace and security worldwide. The 5 permanent members, each has a veto. It's the most undemocratic exercise that has ever been effected by institutional provisions in the history of mankind. So you see, when one of the countries is affected, no action can take place because it exercises a veto power. And you see it in Ukraine, and you see it in the Israeli-Gaza situation. I want to highlight a number of the great opportunities that exist for us to work together. And in doing so, I want to mention a few priority areas for cooperation within the alliance. I propose that as our yardstick for prioritization, we focus on those areas which have the greatest potential to harness multidimensional partnerships in order to unlock the human potential of our societies, how to grow our economies and produce the greatest impact in terms of fundamentally transforming the lives of the majority of the peoples for the better. Before we can proceed to global innovation and driving change, we have to deal with the essential factors for our lives and the survival of the human species, which right now is under severe threat. I start with the collaboration to tackle climate resilience and secure climate justice. We see the spate of hurricanes, droughts, landslides, floods, forest fires as never before, with increasing frequency and intensity. Some of it we have clearly identified as being due to man-made factors. What makes it so bad is that the compounding impacts of these events have been disproportionately felt by the most vulnerable, our children, our women, the disabled, and the poor, who are driven deeper into poverty and despair. We're going to have to spend much more on research how to deal with the horrors of climate change. Between 1990 and 2020, only about 3.8% of the research funding was spent on Africa, whereas for that period, 79% was spent for Europe and North America. Within the diaspora, we have the skills, we have the talents, we have the expertise, we have the capacity for the passing of the academic knowledge, all of which are necessary to deal with climate change. Prayers are good, but the Bible tells us faith without works is dead. Then we have to look at the question of food security. We know food is the staff of life. We also have to look about water security. In Jamaica, the statement by our own National Water Authority says it simply and says it best. Water is life. We had at one time the name, the land of wood and water. We can't afford to destroy or neglect it. We have seen what has happened on the global food chain by the invasion of Ukraine. We have got to develop food security for ourselves. We got to invest more in agriculture. We have to invest more in research. In the case of the Caribbean, the president of Guyana, Irfan Ali, is the person in the quasi-cabinet of heads who deals with the question of agriculture. And they have been making efforts to ensure that in the Caribbean we can develop food and national nutrition security. And again, the reason I'm mentioning this here is because we have people in the diaspora who have the skills, the learning that need to be brought to bear to help us make this a reality. From what I have said, it is clear that harnessing Africa, Caribbean, and diasporic talents through higher education, the flow of knowledge, and the creation of the expertise are all essential ingredients to achieve sustainable development. We have to accelerate our programs of human resource development and employment, especially for youth. All of us, whether in the Caribbean or in New York State, we see the involvement of young people in crime. To turn them away from crime, we have got to get them engaged in meaningful and rewarding activities. The time when it was said, you're young, you will have to wait until you're 40 and to buy a house. Those times done. Social technology has changed all of that. People are aware of what are the requirements for satisfactory living. Young people want to be able to enjoy that, not when they are old, but in their youth. So that acceleration has to take place. Our universities have to be equipped. You will be hearing from others in more details about that. Then I was sitting beside Miss Pat, and I was talking to Leroy, Mr. Graham, before we started, and I told them that I have a challenge to throw out. In leveraging our national strengths and comparative advantages in culture and in sports, look at what is happening. The global music industry is heavily influenced by a new crop of musicians and artists from the Caribbean and Africa. These include Afrobeat stars like Burna Boy, Davido, Wizkid, Asaka, Tiwa Savage, Diamond Platons, as well as reggae and dance hall superstars. If I ever started calling that list, we would be here till the morning. We have Rihanna and Nicki Minaj making their own impact in the United States. Miss Pat, get your sons, the younger ones, get them together with people who have ideas, a thirst. Music, entertainment, and sports are no longer just for fun. They are big business. And we don't want others to control the market for us. The market is ours to capture and exploit. As we know, digital technologies and solutions have become increasingly indispensable to the socio-economic transformations globally, including deepening integration initiatives and the empowerment of people to be productive and live more fulfilling lives. We need the establishment of a joint electronic mass media platform to facilitate information flows, artistic programming, and exploiting the blue economy. The economic, social, and cultural disaster that was the transatlantic trade on humans, and subsequently the era of colonialism, have left legacies of life-threatening disparities for black and colored people right across the globe. We don't often remember that in this Western Hemisphere, the largest number of black people don't live in the United States. They live in Brazil. So, my message is a message black people everywhere on the planet Earth. Peter Tosh had a song, no matter where you come from, if you are a black man, you are an African. The economic, social, and cultural disaster that was the transatlantic trade on humans have placed us in a perilous condition. It will require worldwide mobilization to make meaningful generational change to end centuries of abuse and plain barbarism. That cataclysmic change must incorporate and be led by the affected persons utilizing today's leading-edge technologies. We insist that countries, institutions, private industries, and families who owned our enslaved ancestors must make material restitution sufficient to repay for the irreparable damage we have suffered. The Institute for Africa-Caribbean Advocacy, which I lead, will make no compromise in our insistence to get all that is our due. We deserve it to employ that money in programs of health, education, land distribution, shelter, and technology for sustainable development. But at the same time, we will engage in that fight all persons who are genuinely persuaded, who are equipped and able to help us build that bridge of unity which reconnects all Africans in oneness of purpose and action. The rapid rise of the fourth and fifth industrial revolutions in computing and artificial intelligence offers a real chance for ending aged and existing disparities and life-threatening conditions. The current lack of diversity in creating content and solutions using artificial intelligence will only continue the current racism and inadequate solutions for people of color, such as the inadequacies of facial recognition and software applications. This is the overarching context in which I invite this impressive and influential group to conceive inclusive projects and programs that harness our collective intelligence. The will the skills and knowledge residing in Africa, the Caribbean, and the diaspora to ensure that a new iteration of the Pan-African Renaissance in Africa, the Caribbean, the United States, and the broader diaspora reaches unprecedented levels of vibrancy, impact, and sustainability. And so I close, as they are doing in Accra today. Let this golden triangle of countries and communities resolve in Ocho, Rios during these deliberations to cross that new horizon which beckons us further and beyond. Thank you. I now move from presenter to moderator. I have chosen to join us two persons with particular reasons in mind. The first person to speak will deal with the question of doing business with Africa. And he's not going to do it from a theoretical point only, but from recent experience. He is the CEO of Maybury Investment Company, which I think you all have heard about, and he is also the President and Chief Executive Officer for Supreme Ventures. I now call on Mr. Gary Peart to make his presentation.
Hi, morning, everybody. So Supreme Ventures is a gaming entity. So I looked at my fellow young lady beside me, and we're betting that, ladies before gentlemen. So I owe her a lunch. Anika, I'm the guy that sent you that. There you go. So I have 12 minutes, and I'll run through the quick presentation. I think the modus operandi is after the presentation we ask questions, or do we ask questions as we go along? Sir Patterson? Okay. So I believe my outlook on Africa is probably similar to a lot of people here who have never been to Africa before. And one of the first things I'll point to is that how Africa is beamed to us here in the Western Hemisphere is very different from when you go to Africa. In short, Africa, pun intended, is a gold mine. And, we have, as a child growing up, we've been beamed with pictures, of these babies with bloated bellies and flies going all over their face and stuff. And, poverty abounds. I remember sending a video to a group of mine, and I asked them to tell me where this is, and everybody's like, "Oh, you're back in Manhattan again." And I said, "No, this is downtown Kinshasa in the Democratic Republic of Congo." They're like, "Get out of here." I'm like, "Yeah." When I got up and showed them how many buildings, skyscrapers have been built in the last year, they're like, "Get out of here." I'm like, "Yeah." So that's a country that has Ebola and war and this and that. Aren't you afraid you get shot? I'm like, I haven't seen anybody with guns yet. So I then jump into the presentation, which is there. So Anika, if you can just change as we go along. So, as indicated by the moderator, for my sins, I have two jobs. So I run two publicly listed companies in Jamaica. Maber Investments Limited, which is one of the leading investment brokerage houses in the country. And via their portfolio of investments, we started an investment vehicle that's called Mayberry Jamaican Equities, which says it's the only Jamaican stock you need to own. And we started out in 2006 with about 10 million US. As at September 30, 2023, with the market pulling back 30% in Jamaica this year, the value of that portfolio is a little bit over 100 million US. And that's just all from investing in Jamaican stocks that are listed in the Jamaican stock market. And one of those investments is Supreme Ventures, of which I'm the executive chairman for Supreme Ventures. And that is the largest lottery and gaming company in the world. Not in the world, in Jamaica, but it's actually the only gaming company in the world that has every single aspect of gaming associated with it. So in gaming, you have lottery, which is 6-ball, 2-ball, etc. We also own a horse racing track. We are also sports betting. We have two different types of sports betting brands. We have mini casinos, which are lounges with different VLTs, etc. So across the world, you have companies that specialize in one gaming business or the other, but it's very rare. And as I said, it's probably the only company in the world that actually has a representation in all the gaming entities. In addition to that, we actually have a subsidiary in Guyana. That's the Caribbean entity that I was referred to earlier. We also have a presence in South Africa. And recently, July 27th, we started up, well, actually August 1 officially, but in April 27, 2023, we got our license in Ghana, which is what I will focus on primarily here. So why Ghana? Ghana primarily was chosen because it's the most stable political African country on the continent. And what we discovered is that a lot of the surrounding countries actually rely on Ghana and how Ghana goes about doing business. Specific to gaming, within gaming you have a lot of illegal gamers. And we found that Nigeria, that has a population of 200 million, Sierra Leone, Ivory Coast, etc. Some of these guys use the draw from Ghana to conduct their activities because they trust it. Ghana is one of the few African countries where you have Christians and Muslims, and from a political perspective, there is an understanding, that if the president is Christian, it's very likely that the vice is Muslim and vice versa. So they're very structured that way, and it goes towards a very stable political climate. They vote every 4 years in the first week of December. And it's just something that the populace accepts, that this is the day we're going to vote. So next year, December is when they vote again. What we found interesting when we looked at businesses in Africa, the GDP per capita is relatively low. So in Ghana, it's about 2,300 US per person, which is one of the higher numbers. You have other places that it's as low as 700 or 800. But we found a very interesting statistics. When we looked on the purchasing power, we realize that whilst the GDP per capita is low, the purchasing power is pretty high. So, for example, the minimum wage in Ghana is 15 cedis. One cedi is currently, 11 cedis is equal to $1 US. Let's use 10 for a round number. When you go into the market, you can buy a melon for 10 cedis. You can cut it into 10 slices and sell each slice for 10 cedis. A boiled egg with pepper, which I hear is good for hangovers. Haven't tried it yet. A boiled egg with pepper is 3 cedis. A bag of water is 1 cedi. So people survive on that. And again, what is beamed to us here in Jamaica is that people are sitting with these flies all over us. It's bustling. So yes, you have rich, you have middle class, you have poor, but everybody is turning over money. There's a picture here, if you can go to the next slide. That picture is what is called a spare parts market. That market is basically over 50 acres. They have 15,000 stalls. They have 13,000 tabletops. So a stall, I don't know, your full background in Jamaica. A stall is a wooden thing with some stuff you put on top of it. And then they actually get smaller in terms of tabletops. and then you have rooms of about 20,000. You have between 40 to 50,000 people in this space on a daily basis. And everybody is constantly doing commerce. You will see batteries, you will see car tires, you will see all different parts of spare parts. That is literally 600 meters from 12 brand new brands. So Audi, Peugeot, Porsche, whatever it wants to be. So you can go into the spare parts market and get anything you want. And the level of commerce in here is huge. And it's one of the things I've seen in doing business in Africa. You don't see people sitting on the sideline. Everybody is doing something. Something is happening. A bread van comes by, they buy the bread, and they take a stall, and they put 2 bread there, and they break it up or cut it up, and they start to sell. And the biggest reason we went to Africa is just volumes of people. In Ghana, there are 34 million people. In Jamaica, there are 3 million people. So if we're able to scale our business, after 20 years, Supreme Ventures Group is making about 20 million US a year in profit. If we're able to scale that in Ghana, that looks at 200 million people. But Ghana is just 34 million people. There are like 4 or 5 different countries in Africa that has 100 million or more people as a population. And it's relatively underdeveloped. And the next key point, I don't know if it's here, is the paradox I've found in Africa. So in Ghana, Ghana has one of the most developed mobile infrastructure that I've seen. It's not high-tech, it's low-tech, USSD, SMS, but you have about 5 to 10 million people in a population of 30 million that conduct transactions on their phone. When I go into the fish market, you will literally see 2 people look at each other, they look at the fish, then the vendor, they haggle over the price. Then you just see one stops, take up their phone, the other one gives them their ID. You literally see them put in the ID, transfer the money, and the fish vendor picks up her phone, sees the funds credited to her account, wraps up the fish, and gives it to them. That's a transaction that occurs almost every day right across Ghana and in several other African countries. And why it's a paradox is, from an electronic mobile perspective, you have these transactions moving into the nether parts, the nether regions, etc. But at the same time, the road infrastructure is not what it should be. You know, you literally, when I go to Ghana, I feel like I'm in Jamaica in the 1950s. You know, I don't know if you watch the movie Back to the Future. You're teleported back to a place in 1950s, and you know exactly what's going to happen in the next 50 years. You know that this is it's going to move from having people having a bakery baking bread by hand to ultimately one day somebody's going to get an automated bread line and you can create sliced bread, etc., and you just make a crazy amount of money. Those are the opportunities that are there. Obviously, you're going to need a very good local partner. I've had relationships that have gone there before. It hasn't worked out because the local partner wasn't the ideal person. So selecting your local partner is going to be key. And I think if you have the right local partner, then you can build, because there's significant opportunity there. They have a burgeoning tourist environment. Interestingly, a lot of black Africans, black Americans, I should say, come to Ghana. You go through the whole emotional stuff with Cape Coast and where they export to the people, the whole 9 yards, right? But the opportunity for business there is huge. The final thing that's holding back Africa is that they do not have a developed credit model. Because that's the difference between a developed country and a developing country. And that's one of the things that makes the United States, Japan, Europe so powerful. They have a credit structure. So a lot of these countries, you can't get a mortgage to buy a house. A lot of the transactions is all cash. Banks make a killing in Ghana. Not just Ghana, but in Africa. You know, to transfer US dollars from one account to the next in the same bank, you pay a fee of 3%. Think about that, right? Any transaction you're doing is fully secured and you still pay fees. Some of the fees that I pay here in Jamaica, I'll pay 2 times on the African continent, right? But if you can be a first mover before that credit model starts to come in place. And what do I mean by that? Just like in the United States, you have your credit cards. You can put things on loan. You can buy your house on a mortgage. You can get a student loan, etc. That accelerates the amount of economic activity and pushes numbers into just ridiculous billions, trillions of dollars. And I think at this point, some people might think it's still too early, but I believe, and one of the things I suggest to you, the moment you see an African country that looks like it's going to have a very well-developed credit model, you need to hurry up and move. This picture I took in the spare parts market. I don't know how many people here know, but Republic Bank is actually a Trinidadian bank. And they have made the move, and they have a very big presence in Ghana. And what you're seeing in this spare parts market, again, a lot of you are American, but as Jamaican, we're a huge market is one that has about 1,000 people or 2,000 people in it at the same time. In this spare part market, they had about 5 or 6 banking branches in the market, in all the hustle and bustle. And this is just one of them. And one of the things you will see if you expand that picture is that all the remittance companies or the major remittance companies are aligned there. So MoneyGram, Western Union, Rios, etc. So again, you have the cash. This is diaspora sending back cash. Everybody needs cash. So I'll get back to the credit thing at a later point in time. But the banking infrastructure is credible. So remittance, banking, you can get capital in. A part of the challenge is getting capital out, but they have a developed structure in how that's done. You have to follow certain regulatory requirements. Once you register, you'll be able to convert money and be able to wire your funds out. But more structured countries, I won't call a name, but I was surprised to go into a particular country, and when you go to the ATM, you get brand new blue $100 US dollar notes. This country, their official currency is not US dollars, but all transactions are done in US dollars. You come out of your car, you give them a $50 US, and they give you back change in US dollars. There's several African countries like that. So I close by saying, there's a thing in Jamaica, they claim that, the rich people in Jamaica, they deliberately make the roads bad so nobody can drive and come there so they can live peacefully. I think it's similar in Africa. I think some people are going out of their way to describe this place as the hellhole, but in reality, it is the biggest diamond in the rough and across several of your businesses. Right? If you have the opportunity, you have the right infrastructure, hookup, etc., just take a trip. So I want to close by thanking Prime Minister Patterson for the invitation because I cut my Ghana trip short to come back and address you guys. So, my brethren, I can't leave him out, No, but I feel very strongly about it because, in life, the business that I do at Mayberry, we try to make people wealthy and rich and, financially independent. And because of that, anywhere we see opportunity, we go and try to let people be aware of these opportunities. Because our mantra is win, win, win. We want to win, the customer needs to win, the consumer win, and ultimately the government, if not the ecosystem, should win. So it's difficult when you go somewhere and you're like, Jesus Christ, how did I never tell you about this? And then you don't start to think into it. Why is that the case? Because there's so many things that can happen. And so for those people who have recognized it, in their mind, they're like, hey, I'll hold it, I'll try and make as much out of it before others come. But ultimately, to develop the world, you need to bring in as many persons. Let the best person win, because ultimately it will be a better place. So I pause here. Do I have any more slides, or that's it? Oh, so these are our draw girls. And so we've gone into Ghana, we're putting our draw. We actually leased and created our own studio. It's called the Black Star Studio. We have different products. One of the things that has now created for us in Ghana is that whilst it's a startup and we're still in that early stages, I haven't made any money as yet, we're now realizing that even though Jamaica is one of the best central banks in the region, if not in the world, because of their conservatism, they haven't been moving as quickly on electronic money or mobile money. And what has allowed us to do is that being in Ghana, we have had to develop, innovate, and we have found certain solutions in Ghana that now has put us in a position to take advantage of different markets. So, one of the things I didn't speak about before, Supreme Ventures is one of few companies in the world that actually has its own proprietary software. So put into perspective, we partner in Jamaica with one of the largest U.S. firms and one of the biggest lottery companies in the world in terms of provision of lottery software, IGT. And since that relationship, we've been in business for 20 years. Supreme has actually gone ahead and developed and has its own lottery software. So when I tell you, our metrics are very simple, right? So last year we made 20 million US. This comes after drawing a check to the government for 65 million US and paying my lottery software provider 14 million US, right? So I'm doing all the hard work and everybody has benefits from there. But now, with developing our own proprietary software, we now are no longer at risk. If somebody pulls from us, we can do our thing. But they're very good partners, so we work with them. But our business in Guyana is run on our own proprietary lottery software. It is certified internationally. Our business in Ghana is run on our own lottery software. And now, based on what we're doing in Ghana, so for example, we have now developed what is called a phone-to-phone delivery system. So normally, and especially here in Jamaica, you have to walk into a physical store and you have to give somebody your cash, you get a lottery ticket. We now have developed in Ghana where I can put the software on your phone, whether a smartphone or your basic phone, and you can now sell a lottery ticket from your phone. And then if you win, we credit your account automatically. So that actually would make us significantly more efficient. But most importantly, one of the biggest gating items in going to a new market in the lottery space is the capital cost to roll out your terminals, infrastructure, etc. And because of these developments that have been done by a Jamaican company, it has now put us in a position where we can become one of the first truly global Jamaican companies. So we keep our fingers crossed and hope that we'll endure that journey. And I think the last slide here, we'll just show you. This is our building in Accra. So we actually provide the services to the local license holder, which is a Ghanaian company, and that company is called Game Park in Ghana. And so far, as I said, we started August 1st. We've rolled out 2 games, and last week we rolled out initially digitally, fully digitally. Last week we rolled out terrestrially, and so we're looking to see how best we can grow that business. So I conclude, by saying, come and visit. I think there is significant opportunity. And I forgot this, but based on information I have, and you guys will have to determine that, I understand that one of the largest diaspora markets for Ghanaians is New York City. They have a huge Ghanaian community. So, let's pull it together.
Thank you very much, Gary. We're glad that you sacrificed your visit to Ghana to be here with us today. The person I'm about to introduce also had to make some sacrifice in getting here because, as you know, we are threatened with an unusual amount of rain sometime between this evening and tomorrow. But she has braved the weather from Kingston to be here. I want to share a little secret about her with you. She got involved in the telecommunications business when the head office for cable and wireless in Jamaica was on Halfway Tree Road. And in those days, you had to go and beg and be favored to get a landline. And I don't know how many of you remember, you had sometimes you couldn't get a straight line. You had a line with partners on the line. I needn't say to you what levels of confusion and disturbance that created. But she is now the head of Digital Transtex Limited. And I thought it was very important as we move into the digital age and consonant with what I outlined about the need for cataclysmic changes. That must include how we work, how we communicate, and very importantly, it influences how we think. We are in a verbal situation where black is synonymous with things that are negative. Black sheep of the family, Black Friday. The only time when it's good to be in the black, it's when it comes to money in the bank. You much prefer to be in the black than in the red. Miss Lorna Green is head of Digital Transtex Limited. She is a friend of the Institute for Africa Caribbean Advocacy. She has been doing extensive work in the production of books that will deal very much with the question of image, which must be of paramount concern. And it's my very great pleasure to ask Ms. Lorna Green, the head of Digital Transtex Limited, to make her presentation.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Most Honorable P.J. Patterson, for inviting me to participate in this event. I also wish to thank the Rodneys. It's my second time coming here. My publisher is in the house, and she has taken quite an entourage, Wordy Publishing. And so I'm seeing faces I haven't seen in a while. It's good to see all of you. I wish to recognize and salute, because my remit given today is to not look and analyze reparations, because so much work is being done there. But once the agreement for funds, where do we go from there? What kind of activism we need? What do we really need to do? And I'm looking at this through the eyes of technology. I wish to recognize and salute the years of research, activism, and scholarship done in the past decades, in many instances right here on the campus of the University of the West Indies, ably led by Professors Beckles and Shepard. When we look at this matter of reparations, we see questions, and the most critical one I see posed is both by cynics, critics, and well-wishers, who ask us, how will any of the funds received from reparations be apportioned? who will get what. In this presentation, I will only speak to how we can manage these things, not who will get what, so to speak. I have made some assumptions. I have taken the lower amount from the Brattle report. There have been ranges between 30 trillion and 55 trillion. I stand to be corrected if anyone has any other figure. And in that process, I have halved the lower amount of 30 trillion to 15 trillion. So we're even lowering the amount we're saying we would like, but I'm also saying we will use that as phase one over a 5-year period. It's not science, it's just my being a little pragmatic as I approach this charge I've been given. If we assume approximately 300 million people affected in the Americas and the Caribbean in particular, in the Americas from Canada all the way down to Argentina, and we assume by using the science of DNA testing, we will be able to positively identify those to whom reparations benefits must be apportioned. The amount to be contributed by subject countries, going forward, we need to look at cash and non-cash, because there's a vast reservoir in the non-cash area that they may not feel too threatened by that we need. And I will go through those in my proposal. The areas to benefit in this first phase, I'm looking at health, finance, agriculture, education, and research. Now, my proposal is for a Marshall-like plan. And I would imagine most persons here are from the US, we are clear what the Marshall Plan. It has some negative connotations. However, I'm suggesting we go at it in this all hands on deck, as most Honorable PJ has mentioned, and we take a uniform, unified approach, Africa back in this diaspora. I am proposing this Marshall Plan in the first year with the 15 trillion that we look at health, education, finance, agriculture, and research, as I stated before. Now, artificial intelligence, if you walk with me a bit, and internet technologies would form the core of the actions to be taken, because there we can get large amounts of data, access to information, there are patents out there, there are technologies in health like CRISPR, the genome breakthrough, things that we would need to get to in a very rapid way to end some of the disparities and the inequities. All these technologies would be had. Most Honorable PJ mentioned how much research is in the European, the northern countries. We need access to those, and we need them rapidly. We need equipment. Countries paying into the fund will quantify the non-cash inputs, such as access to critical databases, patents, and research data for our own scientists in our tertiary institutions, in the HSBCUs. Some of this is beginning to happen, but we need them put on rapid so that in 5 years we will see real progress. Using technologies of AI such as large language machines, deep learning, and natural language processing databases, these are the algorithms and codes that will help us parse the large fields of data in health, social media, and other things that will give us application solutions and an environment where we can speak from a scientific basis to the needs of our communities. We need to fast track rapid growth in the numbers of AI-based careers, such as big data engineering, data scientists, and AI engineers. This to be achieved in a term of 1 to 3 years. It's also been highlighted, the lack of diversity as we go into this age of AI. It is posing a threat. It's been documented to pose a threat more egregious, more detrimental than the civil rights, the Jim Crow era. It's worse. So we have to understand what we're facing. Interestingly, the United States FCC just announced, I think 2 days ago, a program to eradicate discrimination and racism in the deployment and pricing of internet, including broadband. This should be a target for all geographies where descendants of enslaved persons now reside. Reliable creation and access to data on land and home ownership, health, education, agriculture, historical data or archives. We need to, what we're seeing, especially in the HSBCUs, and from some of the content creators, are more scientific and less emotional writings about enslavement. We need to continue that in a broader way, with partnerships, of course, in the African countries. We have seen, and it's been documented, Most Honorable PJ mentioned the matter of facial recognition. Most of the codes that are written by young white men or young Indian men who do not take into consideration all the differences relating to culture, color, many things. So, what we're saying, we need to fast track from any reparations payment the development of our engineers, male and female, in this time, because AI is developing. We missed the fourth industrial revolution, which was computers and internet. We were mostly consumers. We didn't create anything. We didn't innovate anything, okay? In this period of AI, we are saying we've got to stop because they'll be detrimental to us as a people. We need the fast processing power of the machines, the accuracy of the information, the breadth and scope of the information to move forward as a people. We can't do without it. We need it. I then looked at the role that our schools are playing today. I have a granddaughter who's 10 months old. She will graduate school sometime in 2040. What will the education system look like then? What will it look like even for the kids who are entering school today, kindergarten? How much of that information we have control over, and how much represents what the colonial imperialistic period of our development since the ending of the transatlantic slave trade, how much of that information actually reflects the victors of that period? And that needs to be changed with immediate effect, the education system. And in concluding this presentation, I thought much about the period of the Black Lives Matter movement when it started during COVID, and many promises were made by corporations. They're going to diversify. Everybody was talking how they're going to help people of color globally. Should I say we haven't really seen much movement? I think you'll agree with me. The use of technologies to enhance the size of research and the discussion teams. We're seeing Zoom. We're having machines that are much faster. We're measuring the speed of data movement, the size of databases. We're measuring them in different differing measurements that are literally mind-boggling. What does that tell us? We can move across databases in different countries and cooperate faster, okay? We're also saying that we should see artificial intelligence and the accompanying technologies as being extremely positive for moving us forward as a people. But how are we going to get there? We have to have the funds. I talked about the 15 trillion, which is much less than 50 and 30. We need to ensure that the activism for reparations today will go into a point where the countries that need to pay will see that cash and non-cash needs to be committed to the table urgently. And finally, I will say that the fourth and fifth industrial revolutions of computers, internet, and AI offers to us the science, equipment processing, accuracy, capable of ensuring we can leapfrog. We don't necessarily have to say we have to go this step. We can use the technology to leapfrog, and it is within that context I'm suggesting, recommending, through my work with the Most Honorable P.J. Patterson and the Institute, that we begin to develop further, deeper research to put this as the next phase of the activism beyond acceptance of reparations. Thank you.
I know much has been said, which is food for thought. But as patron, I'm very mindful of the timing of the conference. We are running somewhat late, so we will formally terminate this session, but we will be around for discussions. I know.
Let's first of all give a continuing round of applause. And we would recognize to hear from you, because we do have another panel, and they will come. And I think it's quite appropriate, especially with the kind of engaging, stimulating matters that have been said here, to give voice to the people in the audience. So, we're going to take possibly 3 questions, and I'm going to exercise. Ooh, I see the hands going up. I want to see some. I'm not going to judge. But I'd love to see some youthful hands pop up, as well as the hands that are up. And I'm going to recognize the first hand I saw, this gentleman in the hat, this lady, Honorable Abbott. I'm going to recognize that gentleman over there on the far side. I wish you would come closer. And then the gentleman in red. Those are the 4 we're going to take. And I'm going to ask our panelists. They have been brilliant, very interesting, thought-provoking. The theoretical, if you will, from this gentleman, putting it in that intellectual and activist context, historically, and then some of the more practical, if you will, from our other panelists. And so now a time for a little bit of conversation, but hold your horses, ladies and gentlemen, because we have another panel coming, and there will be time for that too. So, where did I say I would start? This gentleman here, please, and tell us your name and I'm going to bring the microphone to you so that you can speak up and make it a question now, not a statement. All righty? I'm going to watch you.
First of all, I'd like to thank you very much. I'd like to thank the Honorable P.J. Patterson for opening up this discussion, and the two panelists. You hit on something that I took some notes here, and it's very interesting. I'm going to try to make it very short, but I would like to look at the Marcus Garvey, concept of Marcus Garvey, self-reliance. And along with that being said, the gentleman made a statement there in terms of developing our own, which is based on that concept of Garvey. Creating our own means and methods, which again is based on the principles of the Honorable Marcus Garvey. I also want to look at the term interdependence, interconnectedness, consumerism, producers, and a very important word which fits into all this, globalization. That word is being used, and it's being used in a certain context and so forth. So my question is, I'm going to cut it short. I just want to state those things first. Because it all has to do with this and thinking what I said about Marcus Garvey and self-reliance and globalization, which is actually motivated or guidelines by the WTO and the IMF, is how does this concept of what I call, and it might sound a bit, ambiguous, universal globalization, play into the plan or approach of improving progress for Africans/blacks? Who benefits from this concept when we are living in a more consumer-driven, in terms of a producer concept for our people?
Yes. Yes, and I can respond very briefly. Because in his preamble to the question, he has mentioned all the factors to which I alluded in my presentation, but time would not have allowed an expanse. And I did say very early that all we are doing is within the context of Pan-Africanism. But let's realize one thing. The principles that Marcus Garvey enunciated still remain valid. But the world has changed profoundly between then and now. And we have to apply those principles to the existing situation, including the fact that Africa now consists of 53 nations, independent nations, which was not the case in his time. Ethiopia, and to some limited extent, Liberia, were the only ones who could exercise sovereign independence. In what Marcus Garvey said, in what all of us at this table are saying, it is for the benefit of the people of African descent at all levels. That means at the corporate level, for businesses that are operated by members of the diaspora and from the Caribbean to invest in Africa. Africa is already investing to some extent in North America, because some of the lending institutions, the private development institutions, have a very significant element of capital which has flown from there to the United States, but which we want to divert for investments in Africa. So what I'm saying, Mr. Graham, is it's a holistic exercise. We all have to be engaged in it, but our principal concern must be the benefit for the people, to enable them to earn a proper quality of life, a proper standard of living, and to be able for them to enjoy the qualities which make for dignity in human life.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Just quickly, historically, it was the former colonizers that invested in Africa and the Caribbean. But I understand that Chinese investment in Africa and the Caribbean has taken off. So I was interested to know if you had come across Chinese investment in your field.
Thank you for that question. Thank you. You have your mic. Thanks.
If I have come across them or I've seen them? Yeah, there are. So within the African context? Meaning, I mean, across Africa, yes, you have a lot of Chinese, but you have a lot of other influences, Russian, Indians, especially. East Africa is basically controlled from a business perspective by Indians. And, so you do have a nice, for a better word, a nice mix of different investors who each of them have their different advantages that they try to take care of. So, for example, in my space, which is lottery in Ghana, one of our competitors is indeed a Chinese gaming company or a company that is supported by Chinese technology. But as I said to you again, across the continent, you have many different entities there. I've been into certain countries, and there are actually more Turkish people building skyscrapers. Note what I just said, skyscrapers. Turkish building skyscraper, which is kind of new to me. I thought it's only Chinese people could actually build that cheaply. But you have a plethora of different investors. I think what I'll add, two quick things. What is now happening in Africa, there's this big push where Africans are now trying to support their own Africans. So, for example, a US, Canadian, or European citizen needs a visa to go to Ghana. As a Jamaican, I don't. So they're trying to empower their own. And it is something that, I mean, I won't hide and say it. I mean, as a businessman, I'm taking advantage of. They prefer to want to do business with like people. But notwithstanding that, they will still do business with other people because they honor their contracts, etc. So, as I said, it's a market that is opening. When you travel there, you see the diversity. You have very wealthy black people. You have the middle class, everything. So when you're flying in, depending on how you fly, you will see the citizens coming back with Hermes, Louis Vuitton. When you're driving there in some of these countries, you will see a Mercedes Maybach. You see G-Wagons. So they have that kind of wealth. And if you think about it, you cannot have so many people in the country and that type of money is not going to flow around. You have multinational companies, especially into mining, U.S. companies, etc. And so they make quite a bit of money as well. So you see that mix. But I just conclude by what I'd said earlier. The belief here on this side of the hemisphere, where it's at this point geopolitically U.S. and China, that's not the case on the African continent. You know, as a matter of fact, when you start going further east, the relevance of USA and China is not as big as we would have it here. I mean, just tell a tale out of school. When we went to the Olympics, I mean, you know, there's a particular instance where the US guys wanted more tickets. And they're like, we don't have any more to give you. Because Japan is surrounded by Vietnam, Malaysia, all these things. And each of these countries had 50 to 60 million people. And they're like, we actually can sell out the stadium without you guys, because it's a totally different thing. And I close by making this point. Normally, when you go to a track and field event, the VIP seats are usually 10 meters either side of the finish line, of the 100 meter. So from the 90 meter to about 110, that's where your most expensive tickets are for an athletic event. At the Tokyo Olympics, well, before COVID said you couldn't have people in, at the Tokyo Olympics, the VIP section started from the start line of the 100 meter to the 110 meter line. And they were all sold out. So I just simply close. I mean, Africa they're open to everybody, and based on what I see, and they appreciate everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We have two more questioners, and we're going to respect that. This gentleman, Mr. Moody, who's had quite an interesting ride here from Montego Bay, and still doesn't quite have his room. I need him to speak and ask his question.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Once again, I'd like to thank all the speakers for being here and sharing with us all this valuable information. My question is to Mr. Peart, and I'm sure other persons here would, be would want to be more informed as it relates to doing business in Africa. I remember it was about 5 years ago, I approached an investor here, and he told me about doing business in Africa. But I thought he was just shutting me down. As you already are aware of what I say, some of the things that you say about Africa. As you say, they may be saying it to discourage persons from going there and so forth. Are you in a position where you would, like to show like the younger generation here, mentor the younger generation?
You mean fix the road?
No, in terms of
I think you missed the joke.
mentoring and also showing them ways of how they can get a better understanding of how Africa is operating now, because there's still a fear factor.
Yeah, there's a fear factor everywhere. So you have to remember, one of the biggest, I'm careful I say this, but one of the biggest promoters of fear factors are probably developed countries, because they make so much money from these entities. So in business, there's something that's called a risk-adjusted return. So somebody will say to you, if you do business in a developed country like the United States or Britain, your risk is low. So therefore, you should be able to expect a return of 2% or 3%, which is why the interest rates there are so low. But if you go to this country, you have all these different things. You definitely need a return of 30%. And that's what your return is. That's an example of the bad road to the rich guy's place. I answer your question very simply. Life is about the ecosystem and the ecosystem you're comfortable in. And so, one of the things I found surprising, right, is you go to these places with trepidation, right, and you're then blown away by the similarities of what you see, right? So I don't know if you're a lodge man, I don't know about lodge, but they also have lodge, English, Irish, and whatever. Some of the basic things that you think you can't get there. Telephone infrastructure works, WhatsApp. You can make calls. I conduct meetings driving from one city to the next in my car. All those things are real. Depending on the countries you're in, they have honorary consuls. I was surprised, as I said, when I heard that Ghanaians are a large constituency in New York. So the information is actually right in front of you, right? But a lot of us, we're used to behaving in a particular way. So I haven't found my experience in doing business in Ghana any different from doing business in a lot of other foreign countries. Wherever you go in the world, people will rob you. People will rob you in the U.S. regular, and hide behind law. some of them might come out and say it's the right thing to do. I mean, that's why I became president. Sorry. You know, so what that means, well, on a serious note, what that means is that whether you're doing business, whether here in Jamaica, somewhere else, you have to take the necessary precautions. You have to find the very best lawyers. You have to find people who understand how to do business in a particular place. So I'm saying your partner is important, right? So you're going into a new ecosystem. You can't expect everybody is going to be like the Indians when Columbus come. Hey, happy to see you. You understand? Some of them will shoot you and send you back where you come from. But I'm not sure where you're from, but I'm sure if you are from the US, etc., I can guarantee you that you will have, of the 53 countries in Africa, for example, there is a representative to be found somewhere in New York City. That I can guarantee you they have a consulate that you can go to with a Ghanaian, with a Sierra Leone, Kenya, etc. And if they don't have it, somebody else doubles in the same way. You know, so all of that is there. Because again, in my travels, interestingly, you know, so one of the ways you could do it, if I give you a secret out of school,
Mr.
is...
Pearce, could you wrap it up, please, if you don't mind?
If what?
Could you wrap up your
Okay,
discussion?
sorry. I was just trying to help him.
No, I know, but if you would just
Finish
wind
right
up.
now.
Yeah.
You have a lot of United States investment entities that have special programs for different countries across the world. So if you reach out to them and when you see their parameters for investments, then you can make a decision from there.